Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Killer Presentations, Session 4, Preparing for Success on the Stage. My name is Steve Lowell. Let's get on to our program. Today, we're going to talk about 3 steps that you can use to prepare your presentation so that you're setting yourself up for success. Now, what makes today's session a little bit different is that there's no slides. The slide you see on the screen, that's the only slide you're going to see on the screen until the very end. And the reason is because I was going through this presentation and I was making the slides, and as I do every time I prepare a presentation, I look at the slides and I ask myself, does this slide really support the information I'm trying to teach? Is it absolutely mandatory? And the answer for this presentation was no. So I wanted to put that forward to you as sort of a bonus tip. When you're creating a presentation and you're creating PowerPoint slides, you need to really ask yourself, is this slide and is this PowerPoint presentation absolutely critical to the success of this presentation? And for today, my answer was no. You know, it was about 1.5 years ago, and I had prepared a presentation for a group that I was speaking with, and it was a short presentation. It was only about 10 minutes long, and I had prepared all these great slides for it. And about 10 minutes before my presentation, I was having this feeling that something wasn't quite right about the presentation. I mean, I was prepared. I knew it inside and out. I had practiced it and rehearsed it. I mean, I was totally prepared. And the presentation on the PowerPoint was awesome. But it's something kept haunting me that wasn't quite right. And so about 10 minutes before the presentation, it occurred to me, I don't need the PowerPoint presentation. In fact, my presentation is probably going to be better without it. So I did the presentation without the PowerPoint, and it came off absolutely beautifully. So, all that to say that if you're doing a presentation, don't use PowerPoint for the sake of having PowerPoint. And this is a very big issue that a lot of speakers have, is they'll create their presentation on PowerPoint and then they'll use PowerPoint as their guide. And I highly discourage you from using that. PowerPoint should be used only if it supports and enhances your presentation. And there's a whole bunch of science around why you should really be careful drawing your audience's attention to a PowerPoint slide and off you as the speaker. However, that's for another day. So, suffice it to say, really be judicious as to whether or not you're going to be using PowerPoint for your presentation. You know, it was back in, I think it was March of this year. I had a friend of mine who is an internationally recognized speaker. She came to speak at an event that I was holding. And it was a huge honor to have her come and speak. And when she came, what I noticed, the very first thing I noticed was that her opening was very poor. She came to the front of the audience, and it was very much out of character for her. She came to the front of the audience, and she started off with, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our time together. And that really struck me because I thought that's not the opening of a professional speaker, and that's so out of character for her. And then she went on to her talk, and although she was good from most people's perspective. The people in the audience just loved her, But I look at speakers with a different set of eyes, right? And so I noticed that her content was kind of scattered. She didn't really have a lot of continuity to the content. It didn't seem to have any specific structure or any logical organization to it. There was a lot of stuff, and it was just kind of scattered. And I also noticed with her that she didn't quite have the same air of confidence that she normally would have when she would speak. I mean, she didn't appear nervous or awkward or anything like that. It's just that knowing her and knowing her level of speaking skill, I knew that she wasn't exactly in her zone. And then the presentation came to a close, and as she was wrapping it up, the closing was kind of weak as well. There wasn't any specific call to action, or there was no ending lesson or, profound statement that people could take with them. There just wasn't a lot. Now, people really enjoyed her, and they gave her a warm applause, and they gave her lots of accolades. But the truth is that she did not have the impact that she could have had. Now, afterwards, I went through the videotape with her. And I pointed out all these things that I noticed to help her, because she had asked me to do that. And I said to her, "You were not very well prepared, were you?" And she said no. She said, "Actually, I wasn't prepared." And it made a colossal difference between her ability to speak and connect with the audience, between not being prepared and being prepared. So today, I'm going to walk you through 3 areas where you need to prepare, and how to prepare your presentation so that when you get in front of an audience, you are good to go. You've got a great opening, you're not scattered, your content is organized, it flows beautifully, and it flows into a fabulous close. So here are the 3 areas. We're going to talk about how do you get started preparing your presentation. So you've got a presentation to do, it's time to sit down and get your ideas out. How do you even start? The second thing we'll talk about is how do you actually prepare the presentation itself? How do you assemble it and construct it and put it all together? And then the third thing we'll talk about is how do you prepare your mind so that when you take the stage, you are emotionally and mentally ready to do your very best, because your audience deserves nothing less than your very best. So let's get started. Let's get started with getting started. So here's the first thing you do, and if you have a pen and paper there, you might want to write these things down because this is important. The first thing you want to do when you start generating a presentation is figure out what is your desired outcome. What is your objective? I'm working with a young lady in the U.S. right now, and this young lady is going to be an internationally huge speaker. She's 24 years old, and about a year and a half ago, she was at her own bridal party. She was getting married, and she's a lifeguard, and her friends were all lifeguards, and everything was organized. And just as a friendly joke, one of her friends pushed her into the pool. She hit her head, broke her neck, and is paralyzed from the chest down. And now she is looking to me for coaching on speaking, because she's getting speaking offers from all over the States, TV offers and all these things, and she wants to learn how to speak. So all of that to tell you this. I gave her some instructions how to get started preparing her presentation. And she emailed me back about 4 or 5 days later, and she says, "I don't know how to get started because I don't have a good opening." So I said to her, forget about the opening. The opening will come later. Start at the end and work back. So what is it that you want people to know, to be, to do, or to have as a result of your presentation? So she finally figured out what her result was going to be, and now we're backwards organizing her presentation, and so that's how you need to do it. What is your objective? What is your outcome? And then you work backwards to build the presentation so that everything points towards that desired outcome. So how do you work backwards? Well, you have your outcome. So let's say, for example, today, my outcome is I want you to be able to sit down and start and prepare your mind to deliver a great presentation. So that's my objective. So having that as my objective, I go back and I say, what do they need to know to be able to get started, to prepare a presentation, and to prepare their mind for delivery? What do they need to know? And so I start constructing the presentation backwards from the objective. I'll come up with my opening later. Now, in this particular presentation, there is no huge opening because it's a webinar, and when there's not an audience present, there's a different energy, and we had some housekeeping to do. So this is a training program and not so much of a presentation. But you want to know what those objectives are and then work backwards. Now, here's the thing. You also want to memorize your closing statement. So write that down because this is important. Not only do you need to know what your objective is, but you should know how are you going to close your presentation. What is the last thing you are going to say, so that people know that your presentation is finished, and so that they know that it's time for them to respond with an applause or a purchase or whatever it is you want them to do. So you come up with your closing line and memorize it. Now, I don't encourage you to memorize your entire presentation. In fact, I really guard you against that. It's a bad idea. But there are some things in your presentation you do want to memorize. One of them is your closing statement. Now, factor your closing statement into your objectives, into the final result. So make sure, if it's something you want your audience to do, have a call to action. So if you want them to sign up to a workshop, your final statement will be, and so now take the form that I've delivered to you, or that I've handed out to you, and sign the bottom of it so that you can get started on our program on Monday. Thank you very much. And that's a good closing. It's a call to action, and the audience knows you're finished. So memorize that closing statement. Okay, so this is the little section on how to get started. So number 1, set the objective. Let them put on paper what you want them to learn, to do, to be, or to have. And then work backwards, build your presentation so that it supports those outcome objectives, and memorize your closing statement so that your closing statement brings them right to those objectives. That's how you get started. And then once you get the objectives down, then we move in to the next step. So now you've got your objectives, you're working backwards, you've memorized your closing statement, and now we go into how to actually prepare the presentation. And this is section number 2, how to actually prepare the presentation. Now you'll notice the slide on the screen is a picture of a couple of sticky notes. And that was done very much on purpose. Here's how I prepare a presentation. Now a lot of people do it differently than this. This is the way I do it. It works wonderfully for me, and so I'm going to recommend this to you and put this out for you so that you can apply this if you like. Here's what you do. You get a pad of sticky notes, Post-it notes. I like the big ones, the yellow ones like you see here on the screen. And then here's what I do. I write the objective or the desired outcome on one note, one sticky note. And then I take that sticky note and I find a wall in my house or a door. A wall is better. That doesn't have anything on it. I got some space. Then what I do is I take that objective written on the sticky note and I stick it up as far as I can, as high as I can, in the left-hand corner. And that is my objective for the presentation, and everything else I do now is going to be built around that objective and that outcome. And this is what I'm talking about when I say to work backwards and reverse engineer. I've got the ending in sight. Then I just use green light thinking. You know what green light thinking is? It's when it's non-judgmental and anything that's in your head, you put it out. And I put it out on a sticky note. And I just write it out in sentence form or as clearly as I can, every single point on a sticky note, and I stick it on the wall where I think it should go in the presentation. And I don't judge the thoughts. When they come to me, I write them down and I stick them on the wall. And then by the end of the first session, and I might do this for, an hour or 2 hours or something, I won't judge anything. I won't really try and move anything around too much unless it's very obvious. But by the time I finish this exercise, my wall is covered with sticky notes, all of them with one sentence on it. Every one with one sentence or a couple of words that tells me what it's for. Then I walk away and I leave it for at least 24 hours, at least a day. Because now I've exhausted all the ideas that are in my mind. Now, during that 24 hours, if another thought or another idea comes to mind, I'll write it down and stick it on the wall, but I won't organize anything. I won't change anything. I just want to cathartically get all my ideas out there. So after I've done that, 24 hours have passed, then I come back to the wall and I take a look at it, and for every single sticky note that's on there, I ask myself, is this point absolutely critical to the objective that I have stuck up in the left-hand corner? And I don't mean, is it a nice thing to have, or is it cool, or is it a decent story? I'm talking about, is it absolutely critically important to make my case? And if it's not absolutely critically important, then I take it off that wall and I don't throw it out. I put it on another wall, on another door, somewhere else where I have some room, because I'm going to come back to it later. And I do this for every single point. So that might take hours. And at the end of that, what I've got now is my objective in the top left-hand corner, and I've got a bunch of sticky notes on the wall, each one of them absolutely critical to the presentation meeting its outcome. And there may be 3, there may be 6, there may be 12, there could be any number of them. The purpose here is to try and get as few as possible, and if you can, narrow it down to 3. And you know why we narrow it down to 3? Because you'll remember back in I think it was the first session that we did, the importance of the number 3, the importance of the tricolon, because the brain of your audience accepts and remembers and digests information best if it's delivered in units of 3. So you try and get it down to 3. You do your very best with that. Now you've got your 3 or 4 or whatever number of main points on the wall, all of them relating back to your objective. Then walk away. I walk away again, and now I've got my second wall filled with all the other points. Okay? I leave it for another 24 hours or so. Then I come back to it and I rethink it. Are these points really the ones I want to make? And then once they are, I'm convinced that they're the right points. I'll put them in the right order. I'll stick them on the wall in the right order. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to the other wall where all this other stuff was. And then I'll look through those points. And so for main point A on wall number 1, I'll go to wall number 2 and I'll look at everything I've got there and I'll say, which of these points is a good supporting point for main point A? And then I'll pick 3 or 4, but 3 is better. And I'll do that for each of the 3 main points I have on wall A, on wall number 1. And then I'll just keep doing that. So by the time I'm finished now, I've got my objective in the top left-hand corner. I've got sticky notes for my 3 main points, and underneath or beside those, I've got sticky notes for points that support each of the 3 main points. So you see what I'm doing is I'm giving myself a visual map of my presentation. Plus, I'm reviewing all the information over and over again in my head, which is galvanizing the information in my brain. Plus, I'm cathartically getting out all of my ideas and making them accessible to me whenever I need them. So I keep doing this, and I'll leave it for 24 hours, and I'll come back to it again. And I'll just keep doing this. It might take 2 weeks for me to do this. And I'll just keep coming back to it until I have the exact points that I want, all the supporting points that I want in the proper order, and I've got my closing statement and my call to action or whatever it is I need, and it's all up there on one wall. And now I've got my presentation. And not only do I have my presentation, but over on the second wall where all the other stuff went, I've got all this extra material that I could use if I need it. If I get questions, if I have extra time, however I need to do it, I've got all this other information now that I've already thought about that could be entered into my presentation if required. But I've taken the effort to isolate the most critical stuff. Now I've got a whole board, a whole wall full of ideas. Now here's another tip with all of this. If you are going to use PowerPoint, if you cannot write your points on the sticky notes so that it makes sense on the sticky note in regular handwriting, then it's too much information for one slide. Let me repeat that. If you cannot write your points on one sticky note in regular handwriting so that it makes sense, it's too much information for one slide. So you need to be able to state whatever your point is in a sentence or in a sentence fragment so that you can read it and get it. The audience needs to read it and say, yes, I know what that means. Then you know you've got the right amount of text for a single PowerPoint slide. Any more than that, and you've got too much text. Okay, so real quick review. Let's see where we are at now. We've talked about how to get started. We talked about setting the objective first and backwards engineering your presentation. We talked about developing and memorizing your closing statement so that it's clear and concise and directs people directly to the desired outcome. Then we talked about taking sticky notes, putting the main point on one sticky note, putting it up in the left-hand corner of a big wall, and then just cathartically draining your brain on one sticky note at a time, getting hundreds of them all over the wall. Then we talked about you leave that for 24 hours, you come back and you reanalyze and you dwindle those down to the top 3 points. Everything else is on another wall. And then after another 24 hours or so, you go to the second wall and you pull out supporting points, and you keep doing that day after day after day until you've got your entire presentation laid out on the wall in front of you in sticky notes. Now you take that information, put it on a piece of paper or type it into your computer or put it into PowerPoint or make handwritten notes. But after that, ladies and gentlemen, there is no way you are going to have to refer to notes. You are going to know your stuff so well that there is no way you're going to have to refer to your notes because you've been looking at this stuff for days, maybe even weeks. Okay? So now you've prepared your presentation. The next thing to do, and this happens right before you take the stage, is you need to prepare your mind for proper delivery. And this is where so many speakers fall short. They just don't do these things. I'm going to share with you a couple of exercises that you can do that will absolutely help you prepare your mind for a magnificent delivery before you speak. And here's the single most important one. The single most important one is, I call it the face stretch, because that's what it is. I don't know how many muscles we use when we speak, but I know we use a lot. We use muscles in our face and muscles in our jaw and muscles in our throat and our tongue and everywhere else in our voice. But you know, all athletes and sports figures, all dancers, actors, all of these people will warm up before they perform. I used to be a singer. I sang in a band all my life, and we would go, before the gig, and we'd warm up our voices. And actors will do this, and hockey players will do this. They'll stretch on the ice before they play. And as a speaker, you should do this too. You need to stretch your face. So here's what I do, and I do this every single time I speak or I'm going to a networking event, and I did it today before coming on this conference call. Here's what you do. About 15 minutes before showtime, before you take the stage, you go somewhere where nobody's going to see you, in your car or in a men's room or ladies' room, somewhere, and you open your mouth as wide as you can in every possible direction. Very slowly. You open it, twist it, turn it, and you should feel it stretch all around your face, all around your mouth. And the reason you want to do this 15 minutes before showtime is because if you're like me, I get all these red marks on my face, right? Because it looks like I've been stretching my face, because I have. So I want that to go away before I take the stage. But open your mouth in all different directions. And then what I do is I take each vowel and I overpronounce each vowel as I'm widening my mouth. So I'll be going A, E, I, O, U, and overpronounce everyone. And I'll do that 4 or 5 times. And what that does is it helps stretch all the muscles in my face, all the muscles in my throat and my tongue and my voice, everything, so that by the time I get in front of the audience, the words flow very smoothly. You might even do your do-re-mis. I do this sometimes just to make sure that I can get vocal dynamics in my presentation. So I'll just sing the do-re-mi scale a couple of times and get those vocal cords loosened up so that it flows and I've got vocal dynamics when I present. So that's point number 1. Stretch the face, stretch the vocal cords. Point number 2 is this. Your self-talk matters. Write that down. Your self-talk matters. Now, a lot of speakers that I know, they get so wrapped up in the fact that they're about to speak that they forget to give themselves a little pep talk, a little pat on the back. And so I do this every time. I'll go to the men's room or somewhere quiet, and I'll just, especially in the men's room or the ladies' room where there's a mirror, because this is very powerful if you have a mirror. Look in the mirror, get a picture of what the audience is going to see, and give yourself some accolades. Give yourself a little attaboy or a little attagirl, pat yourself on the back, and congratulate yourself for taking the step to be the leader and stand in front of that group and deliver your expertise. And the reason why this is important is because if you remember a couple of sessions ago, I talked to you about the importance of the emotions. Remember that? And how emotions have physical manifestations, and how those molecules of emotion flood your body and affect the way your body behaves at the physical molecular level. And that's why you want to do this. It's not just a raw mental motivation thing. When you do this, it has a physical effect on your body. And those molecules of emotion, positive emotion, go through your body and change your chemical structure so that when you stand in front of the audience now, you have a posture driven by positive emotional content. And your entire countenance will be different, your posture will be different, your voice will be different, your body language will be different, your self-talk matters. So give yourself that pat on the back, give yourself that little attaboy or attagirl before you speak, and I guarantee you that, along with the face stretching, is going to make you smooth, confident, and far more comfortable in front of an audience. And the very last point that I'd like to make today is this. Don't worry about being perfect. You've done your work. You've decided what your objective is. You've backwards created your presentation. You have memorized your closing statement, and by the way, you want to memorize your opening statement. After you've gotten all those sticky notes all over the wall, then come up with your opening statement and memorize that. So that when you walk out there, you've given yourself the pat on the back, you've stretched your face and your voice, and you'll just launch right in to your opening statement, and you are on a roll, baby. But the thing is, forget about trying to be perfect. If you're not perfect, nobody cares. Nobody's going to notice. And if you screw up huge, laugh about it, make an issue out of it, make it a point of comedy, but don't worry about it. So that wraps up our session for today. Just a real quick review then. Number one is set the objectives first. Go backwards in your presentation. Memorize that closing statement. Prepare your presentation with sticky notes all over the wall. Take days or weeks to do it if you have to. Do the face stretch and the voice stretch before you go out. Set up your self-talk, pat yourself on the back, and don't worry about being perfect. Now, our next session is 1 week from today, and in our next session, we're going to talk about why people should listen to you, how to establish your credibility as a presenter, and how to make yourself feel and make your audience feel like you belong there and they need to listen to you. And if you've got any questions between now and then, email me at steve@lowellworkshops.com, and I will see you 1 week from today for session number 5. Thanks so much. Have an awesome day.